My co-worker at the psychiatric clinic I used to work at used to stalk patients. Several years ago, I got my first healthcare job as a psychiatric technician at this outpatient clinic. Psych techs have many different tasks. In that office, my role was like a medical assistant. I was excited to start my career in healthcare. I felt like I was contributing to something really meaningful. The team was all warm and welcoming. All the staff were really polite to each other and to patients. There was this one assistant, let's call him Tom, who was a little eccentric, but even he was mostly polite. Nothing about him screamed danger or anything, but it just felt awkward with him. He had this habit of standing way too close when we talked. His gaze when he talked to you was seriously intense. It was like he was trying to read my mind or something. At one staff meeting, his stare was so distracting that I lost my train of thought. Our break room had this huge screen showing live footage from the security cameras around the clinic. We didn't record anyone's appointments, but we recorded everything else, like the waiting room, the little conference room, etc. One day, I saw Tom just hanging out in front of the screen, completely fixated on a patient in the waiting room. He wasn't just glancing, he was standing there paying really close attention. That patient was literally just sitting and waiting for his appointment. I asked if something was up with that patient, and Tom said something like, "No, I just find it interesting to observe how they act when they think no one's watching." That was a really weird thing to say. The longer I worked there, the more I noticed some concerning behaviors. He would linger around patient files way too much. Most healthcare providers had switched to electronic patient records. For some reason, that clinic did not switch. All of our records were still paper, and we kept them in a file room. Once, I caught him deep into the file of a patient who didn't even come to our clinic anymore. When I asked what he was working on, he said just catching up on old cases. One of our patients was a sweet young woman whom I will call Rachel. Rachel confided in me that she felt like someone was watching her all the time. It's super important to take those feelings seriously in our line of work and dig deeper instead of brushing them off. Rachel mentioned she thought someone from the clinic might be keeping an eye on her outside of work. My heart sank when she said, "I think it's Tom." To be honest, if she had said anyone else's name, I might not have reacted differently, but when she said it was Tom, I instantly believed her. She hadn't seen anything super obvious, like a car parked outside or anything like that, but she had noticed Tom hanging around her apartment complex sometimes. Like I said, hearing her say that she thought it was Tom made me trust her instincts. A few nights later, I decided to test the waters and casually asked him, "Hey, Tom, what do you know about that patient Rachel?" His answer was uncomfortably detailed. He told me all this irrelevant information about Rachel's personal life, which had nothing to do with her treatment plan. Then he mentioned how Rachel had cancelled her last appointment. Not because she was busy, but because she went out for lunch with friends instead. He saw it on Instagram and calculated what time it must have been. He talked about it so casually that it felt like monitoring her personal life was just a normal part of the job. I didn't know what to say. His idea of professional boundaries was so different from mine that if I told him he was being inappropriate, I didn't think he would agree. The next day, I brought this up with another one of my co-workers, whom I will call Sarah. Sarah said something like, "Yeah, I've heard rumors. Some patients have mentioned seeing him outside the clinic. It felt like everyone had sensed something was off about Tom, but no one had taken any real action yet." Then, one chaotic day while trying to catch up on documentation, I asked Tom if he had a spare notebook. He handed me one. I don't know if this was a notebook that Tom meant to keep to himself, but it wasn't empty at all. It was filled with detailed notes about patients, what they wore, their addresses, their departure times from the clinic. Way too much information. And there was even a section dedicated to Rachel, with all these little details about her coffee preferences and jogging schedule. I immediately reported the notebook to our supervisor, who promised to look into it. But nothing happened after that. I ended up quitting and finding a different job. I couldn't stay in an environment that allowed his behavior.